this song reminds me of this person, but then what is actually happening in the music? You could kind of parse those things out. I think the main takeaway is really just focus on active listening. Is something I would recommend strongly, because I mean, also over engagement in musical stimuli or noise can also be harmful for your ears and longevity of your ability to hear. So
Right.
reduce the volume, listen more actively.
Yeah.
Called mind surfing as a way of describing musical absorption. And I said to myself, well, this is perfect. There's someone else feels the same way as me, and this is my way forward. This ability to listen extrinsically on a stimulus outside of yourself, and also be right on the cusp of relating it back to yourself, being able to listen to the music and then listen to yourself. And there's a sweet spot between this oscillation between external stimulus and then, oh, this song reminds me of my ex-girlfriend, or this song reminds me of, dinner on Friday. If you're fully thinking about what you're going to have at dinner, then you're not listening to the music, arguably. And if you're listening just to the music, then there's no space for you to think about yourself. And I think the sweet spot is finding this middle ground.
But here's an image describing this, and if I understand correctly, maybe let's just go through the differences. There's a singular focus and plural focus. So how are you displaying your attention? The grid is either singular focus or plural focus, or strong allocation or weak allocation of your attention. So I guess someone who's very focused in playing their music is thinking about the notes, whereas someone who is on a surfing mind will be able to think about the notes and think about their ex-girlfriend or something, or their girlfriend. Hopefully there's more positive, or depends how you think about it. Yeah. And mind wandering, thinking about several things, but not necessarily very focused. Allocate 5 minutes a day to focus on a song that you're listening often. Think about it, play it again, and think of different aspects while you're listening to that song.
There could also be a sense of curiosity. Approach music listening with curiosity. Try to listen for something you haven't heard before in the music, and I think that might also stimulate more cognitive engagement, which might be beneficial.
Welcome to Health, Vengeance and Harmonies podcast. I'm Leonardo Muller-Rodriguez, a PhD student exploring the intersection of neuroscience, music therapy, and sleep. Before I introduce my guest today, Bradley, I'm going to introduce the inspiration behind the podcast, which is René Girard's concept of mimetic desire. This philosopher, René Girard, suggests a force or mechanism underlying all social interactions and emotions, where on the positive end, behaviors towards our similars are compassionate and empathetic, whereas on the negative side of this, we display feelings of rivalry and scapegoating and projection, as is a term in psychology. Just going to show you this little visual which describes the concept. And today I have my rival Bradley with me. So I'm here with Bradley Austin-Keiller, a trained neurologic music therapy. So you've practiced as a music therapist for several years in Canada, and now you're here as a researcher doing a master's in neuromusicology, and exploring how we can better train our intentional listening in music therapy contexts. And I'm just going to share Bradley's LinkedIn, where you can learn more about him. I'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the bio. But how else would you describe yourself, Bradley?
I'm passionate about music, and I'm passionate about helping people. So I think the intersection of music and psychology is where I'm at.
Awesome, awesome. You're a musician as well, obviously, to be a music
I
therapist.
am, I am, I am, yeah. Yeah, I studied jazz bass primarily, and then I, moved to guitar and had to adapt musical skills to the clinical populations.
Okay, nice, nice. That's really cool. Jazz bass, is that double bass or electric bass?
Both electric bass as well as double bass, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a bassist by training as well. That's
Oh,
electric bass.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, that's
I
cool.
didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah, and so you've trained with clinical populations. What kind of populations?
Yeah, so back in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, I trained at Concordia University for my music therapy degree. Um, I worked in a day center for older adults. I worked at a school for primary school, and then
Okay.
the longest internship I had was at a medical facility, a hospital, where I worked primarily in the adult psychiatric unit,
Okay.
providing providing musical interventions to that population, as well as in emergency psychiatry, actually, which was a
All
really
right.
enriching experience. Yeah,
Wow. Wow. So you've had adults helping adults and in psychiatrist settings and children as well in primary schools. Yeah.
exactly. Yes. The
Wow. Mm.
with children, I found the neurologic music therapy training particularly effective in the school setting, helping with children with attention. Um, was my primary was the most frequent intervention I used.
All right. That's very interesting. Before we move forward, it would be nice to define what is neurologic music therapy. Well, how would you describe that? I just had a quick Google image search, which maybe image is not the best way of understanding neurologic music therapy, but here are some icons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How would you
I
describe it?
think that image on the left there is probably the most efficacious at describing it. It's the integration of
Yep.
neuroscience and music using structured protocols to to achieve therapeutic goals. Most often functional goals, however. Um, you know, things like attention, things like um, motor control, using music as a tool and a vessel to make those changes in an individual. The body has music affects the body in a holistic way, and so um, being able to harness these skills, we're able to um, see the changes.
That's interesting. And so there is an understanding of the brain when trying to use music in this way. And here are different aspects that you can use music to train different parts of your cognition, right? So executive function or motor control, attention. Um, Before we dive into attention, I suppose you've worked with other aspects of it because it's such a holistic therapy normally. But do you have examples of your neurologic music therapy, uh, usage, if that's something you can share?
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
yeah.
It's going to be an attention example, unfortunately, or not
Okay. No,
unfortunately, but
that's what we wanted
I was,
to discuss about today. I
yeah,
was just
exactly.
seeing
So
what's up. Yeah.
I used musical attentional control training, um, which is it's a structured auditory task to effectively enhance the cognitive engagement of an individual. And so there's different types of attention, as you know. Primarily, I was working on sustained attention. So I was working with a student
Okay.
who had challenges staying focused in the classroom for a long period of time, as well as being continuously distracted by external stimuli. And so using using music as a tool to create distractions effectively and prompting a musical response from her as well. Um, there's a prolonged experience of attention because music is a naturally um, rewarding experience as well.
Hmm.
That in itself is the goal. We use music, which is innately rewarding to most individuals, as the vessel for which we're going to be practicing these cognitive tasks. So using rhythm, for example,
All right.
every time I clap three, respond in this way. Every time I clap four, respond in this way, and it requires someone to be focused on the actual task.
Interesting. So that's an example where you would go like, and now you have to elicit some sort of response. The child would.
Exactly. Elicit some response to the stimulus, right? Which requires attention on the stimulus,
Okay.
um, which is the primary. I think this is the primary active ingredient in musical attentional control training, as
Oh,
proposed by Dr. Tout. Yes, the founder of the Neurologic Music Therapy,
okay.
THAUT.
THAUT. Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. So you've given an example of using rhythm and asking a child to focus on the type of rhythm, the rhythm pattern, so that they have to react in a certain way. Because they have to identify which rhythmic pattern is being played, that has to force them in a way, or force them to pay attention. um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
so there's rhythm that you could use, and just listening to rhythm. You said you'd ask them also to musically engage, right? Is that
Yeah,
the
exactly. So, I mean, the response elicited could either be a sort of repetition or different instruments that we have in front of them. So, every time there's a triplet, play the bongos. Every time there's a quarter note, play the tambourine. That way there's different stimuli being
okay?
active at the same time, and having the musical response that they're creating feeds back to them being engaged even further.
So it's a more elaborate musical chairs.
Effectively, yeah.
No, that's great. So, and you obviously see improvements in the attention of these students. Is that something you notice, or is it
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
how would
So
yeah,
primarily, you would take. I think the first step in any therapeutic intervention is obviously doing some sort of assessment, and so there are different assessment tools that are being used. Um, None of which I can currently remember, unfortunately, but assessment tools that you can utilize to really have a systematic view of the improvements being made. It's not just observable, but it's quantifiable. And that's the important part about the treatment goals, is that it's something that can not only be observed but measured, right? And
of
something that
course,
could
yeah.
be discussed upon with teachers, with parents, because otherwise, if we don't base ourselves on a standardized practice or a standardized assessment goal, then who are we serving? And I think it provides more
Right.
legitimacy to the field.
Mm-hmm. And the specific scales is not as important, but I mean, in scientifically, yes, you find some that are reliable because they're being validated on different sample
Exactly.
sizes, and that's why you would use it in a clinical setting. But in essence, you're kind of looking at maybe how do you have examples of what the type of behaviors you're looking at?
Oh, absolutely. In a
Okay.
classroom setting, we can notate the amount of times that a child is disengaged.
Mm.
How can you define disengagement? You can observe someone looking away every time someone's head is lifted from the paper, every time someone gets up from the chair, for example. These are all things that are observable, that we can notate
Mhm.
and observe, that are, I guess, correlates of staying focused on the
Right.
task at hand, right? If someone's constantly getting up, then chances are they're not fully engaged in the material at hand. But that's an example. So time
Cool.
duration, frequency, data, all good things to be able to identify, a decrease in standing, or just a
Yeah.
prolonged engagement. We could be looking at between improvement from 5 minutes of focus to 10 minutes of focus, for example, and that could be
Mhm.
the primary goal in itself.
That's fantastic. And the fascinating aspect is that you're doing music therapy outside of the classroom. You might be doing it in a physical classroom, but you're doing it not
Yeah.
during the educational moment. And uh, this is training and affecting their lives outside. And this would be the same reason why music therapy is being applied in clinical settings, like in psychiatric uh, wards or hospitals that you worked with, or adult community centers. You're very interested in training the intentional listening, and you've called this musical absorption training, or you're trying to develop a protocol this year
Yeah.
for that. And Um, I mean, there's many aspects we can continue discussing about. For instance, mind wandering is something that we can touch about. You might be familiar with that, which is basically disengagement, right?
Yeah.
But before we go into that, what inspires you actually to want to improve music listening in a music therapy context and develop a
Yeah,
protocol?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it started really during my training. We would engage in these experientials where um, before a receptive experience, there would always be this induction, this relaxation induction, this body awareness, um, and it was occurring across contexts. Depending on the therapist that would come in to do the induction or to do the experience rather, there would always be this sense of this preparatory phase. And I thought to myself, it was rather interesting that there was always this preparatory stage of relaxation prior to the listening. And I thought to myself, is it the music doing the changes? Is it music that's yielding the effects of calm after this experience, or is it the
Mm.
relaxation part?
Right.
Um, and I started really critically thinking about that and started to evaluate it in the research, thinking that, well, in practice, we know it works. I've done it as well. You know, you need to, if someone comes into a room and they're fully distracted, they're fully excitable, then we need to prepare someone. There's always, you know, every time you walk into a room before an interview, there's always this sort of body awareness, and you kind of have to, all right, let me breathe first to get myself ready for this. Um, and I think that's an innate thing that most people do. What I thought about afterwards is that for myself, for listening to music, I always listen to each individual part of the music. If I really want to be focused, there's the song by Aerosmith, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Halfway through the song, there's a triangle solo, and and whenever I listen to the song, that's the only thing I can hear in it, is this triangle solo that comes out. And whenever I point it out to people, they tell me, you know, Bradley, I wish you hadn't done that, because that's all I can hear now in the music. It's just this triangle solo that pops out at me. And I think there's something to be said about that, this ability to listen to the music with a certain focus. I think there's a lot of people currently, there's even empirical research on this, that music is used as background noise. Music is used in background noise in elevators and stores, as
Yeah.
you know, in media. It's everywhere.
Mm.
And so I think in a music therapy context, it's almost imperative to have someone calm down and be able to focus on themselves first before engaging in a musical stimulus, because otherwise we want music to be the vessel of change. Then people have to listen to the music, is where I started thinking about this.
Interesting.
And the idea of absorption has come out, you know, has a long history. Tellegen and Atkinson, 1974, you know, their absorption is, you know, a deep state of engagement, full attentional resources. You know, now there's the whole flow literature about flow having the different parts, attentional control, level of complexity, and then absorption with it. I think the definitions of or the semantics of the words are challenging sometimes to tease apart, you know, absorption versus flow versus mind wandering. It's all a challenge, but in the context of music listening, I think absorption is the greatest word that I've come up with.
Okay.
It's the state of deep listening, full engagement, where you lose sense of time. You can lose sense of yourself, really, in the music. And once the music finishes, you sort of snap out of it and go, oh, okay, like this happened. You know, I felt something. You know, my body became engaged with it.
Very nice. Very, very. So I love to hear the background behind this. It's indeed the effects. You're kind of wondering about the effects of relaxation prior to a listening therapy session, or just a listening session, and how what we focus on a song affects our experience of it. And if I understand correctly, would you like, for instance, people to notice that, for instance, a triangle solo is happening, and that's the main thing. But also you like them to be able to detach from that and have that ability to focus on other things during that triangle solo. Is that something
Yeah,
you'd be interested in?
absolutely. And so during this research process, I had this idea of, being able to focus on the music and being able to focus on yourself. And there was this limited research in that area of absorption in this context of, one, listening to yourself, but also listening to the music. I was really stringent on this aspect of listening to the music outside of yourself, and I stumbled upon a Norwegian phenomenologist, Simon Hufting, just last year, released a paper called mind surfing as a way of describing musical absorption. And
Interesting,
I thought
interesting.
I said to myself, well, this is perfect. There's someone else feels the same way as me, and this is my way forward. And so that was the he had the perfect words to describe what I was thinking. Um, this ability to listen extrinsically on a
Mm,
stimulus outside of yourself, and also be right on the cusp of relating it back to yourself, being able to listen to the music and then listen to yourself. And then there's a sweet spot between this oscillation between external stimulus and then, oh, this song reminds me of my ex-girlfriend, or this song reminds me of, you know, dinner on Friday.
mm,
Um,
mm.
if you're
Interesting.
fully thinking about what you're going to have at dinner, then you're not listening to the music, arguably. And if you're listening just to the music, then you can't. There's no space for you to think about yourself. And I think the sweet spot is finding this middle ground.
That's fascinating. I came about this research also as well, which is I like to share an image about mind surfing, and I didn't dig much into it, but here's an image describing this, and if I understand correctly, maybe let's just go through the differences. So yeah, people who have there's a singular focus and plural focus. So how are you displaying your attention? The grid is either singular focus or plural focus, or strong allocation or weak allocation of your attention. Um, so I guess someone who's very focused in playing their music is thinking about the notes, whereas someone who is on a surfing mind will be able to think about the notes and think about their ex-girlfriend or something, or their girlfriend. Hopefully, there's more positive, or depends how you think about it. Yeah. And mind wandering, thinking about several things, but not necessarily very focused. Um, and let me see if these are my notes. So if there you go, just next to it. In this study, actually, they looked at reconstructing the brain activity of people listening to music while asking them, are you mind wandering or are you not mind wandering? And what they've noticed is that the brain activity resembled best the musical stimulus when people were not mind wandering, so they were focused on the music, or if they had high familiarity with the music. So you see high mind wandering here in blue, and if they are familiar, yes, they are pretty much the same level as if you weren't mind wandering. And so this is a reconstruction of the music based on the brain activity. So this is how they do it. There's acoustic stimulus and there's EEG brain activity that's transformed to resemble, to see to what extent it resembles the acoustic stimulus. What does this make you think of?
Um, I think it's very, very on par with the discussion. I think there's also there could be a sweet spot in, I actually would have expected more of a an upside down bell curve. This, if there's
Mm,
too much mind wandering, then you won't be then it won't represent the music, and if there's too little mind wandering, then um, I think in terms of absorption, perhaps. I think that's more related, this reverse bell curve. But that's fascinating. It's very fascinating research.
Interesting, interesting. And I guess they just had a binary group, whereas here this
Yeah,
description is more there's four categories.
exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're very interested in how we can improve our mind surfing. Is that what you'd like to improve, or just in general a strong allocation to music?
Well, I think the primary goal is to really raise the point of intentional listening, and that um, if you if you indicate someone to listen to music with more attentional resources, if you describe to someone to allocate, if you tell someone or instruct someone to allocate more attentional resources to the music, um, I would argue that, and I've observed in my practice that people are often more engaged or more active in the experience, and potentially it might yield greater outcomes on well-being, but there's individual differences in absorption, right? A lot of research has come out that there's some people just have a higher propensity of being more easily absorbed into stimulus or into stimuli. And so I think the goal of this absorption training is to kind of level that playing field, is to have everyone engaged at the same level.
Mm,
And my view of how to do that is also through the lens of um, research that examines that there's different cognitive listening styles, that each person has a different way of approaching music. There's the empathizing and systematizing theory um, from 2008, Krautz, where they describe that there's some people really empathize with the musical stimulus. They listen to its emotional valence, and there's other people who really break it down. Similar to that of music theory, harmonic analysis, so to speak. Where someone listens to it and tries to break it down into each of its pieces. And I think both are very valuable in absorption. And I think for those who are perhaps more empathizers, might require a little bit more systematizing, and those that are systematizers might require a little bit more empathizing. And so I broke
mm,
down this training via influence of the neurologic music therapy training or protocol MACT, attentional control, because it's an already tried and true proven treatment for enhancing attention. And so I wrote up. I'm in the process of writing prompts to to allow someone to focus on the dynamics, having someone focus on the rhythm, having someone focus on timbre, different elements of the music, and then secondary parts that would be, well, how do these different musical elements make you feel? Do you want to tap along? Do you want to burst out singing? What does it remind you of? What is a memory that it calls to you? What is something in your life that you can connect to this music? It's this implicit decision making of, where am I going to listen? Am I listening to the drums? Okay, I've listened to the drums for a little bit. What does it make me think of now? And I think this constant effort of back and forth is really where the sweet spot is at improving this absorption. So I'm designing this training protocol with attention in mind, with relaxation in mind, and of course, nothing is required of a participant. Of course, it still has to be with warmth
yeah,
and care. So
of course.
if a participant or a music therapy user is doing it, then they can choose whether or not they want to engage in all of the processes or not.
Yeah, that's a fascinating combo there. That there's the, let's say, maybe the more music lover, or well, the way you described it, systematizes empaths, or empaths was the word. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That difference in musical personality is, oh, am I more a daydreamer when I listen to music? Am I feeling this? Do I just want to move and dance to it? What am I? Yeah, and that's, you say, yeah, you'll be asking about that. You'll be asking, what do you feel? What do you imagine? What does it make you think of? Yeah, how does your body feel? And then there's the other aspect, like, oh, actually, the reason you're feeling all of this, is because music has an architecture. And you're going to ask them, hey, what instruments are being played? Will be timbre. You're going to ask them, what are the rhythms? You know, can you repeat the rhythms? Because that's a clear way of knowing if they understand it. Very much the melody or things like that. And then depending on the personality, you would start wherever is best, right?
Yeah, I think there's also a level of the training part that comes in through with this, is that over time I would hope to see, or I would expect to see, that the listening style can change, that someone can listen to music differently over time, and that if the primary goal or the primary reminder is active listening in music, then that's something that can be changed over time, and eventually one can just listen to music actively should they choose to. You know, there's times that I certainly want to listen to music as background noise. If I want to focus on a task, I do that. But in order to reap therapeutic benefits, I would argue that you have to listen with intentionality. So you have to sit there and focus on the music, focus on the self, focus on the lyrics. Listen to sad music if you want to. People do that, you know?
Yeah. Well, it seems that the depression literature shows that sad music is the best for those recovering for those situations. So you can also use it for background music and focus on a task that you're doing, but that the therapeutic benefits come into when you're doing active listening. That's great. Because why is it beneficial? Do you develop? We've mentioned in the classroom setting that you could develop skills that are beyond the music therapy session. But do you develop body awareness, interoception? Have you heard about that? You know, inner sense awareness, or do you develop emotional regulation skills? What do you develop? What are the benefits?
Well, I think the benefits of musical entrainment or musical absorption are entrainment. You know, if you focus on the rhythm, then you know there's systems in the body that automatically match to the music, and you know you can have your respiration rate that synchronizes to the music, heart rate synchronization, all things that inevitably will decrease body tension. If you become more aware of your body, then you can simply, you know, I guess reduce muscular tension, and improvements on well-being, I think, would come directly from that. If there's a sense of body calm, then your brain has to be, if your brain is focused on a stimulus, then there's no room for it to be in distress, I suppose, as well. And if that's something that you train every single day, then when you put a pair of headphones on, or if a situation becomes too overwhelming, then you can put headphones on, listen to music, take a little walk, synchronize your steps to it, and focus on the music, then inevitably you can go on with your day and feeling a sense of calm. Maybe that's too hopeful of me to think that this is possible, but you know, I think that's something that I could do. I think that's something that many people in my environment can do as well.
So that's a recommendation that you give. You would say, oh, grab a headphone and go for a walk, if you're feeling distress. But maybe you're saying, well, this could be a bit unrealistic. If you are distressful in a situation, you might not think about that, unless maybe you have a headphone accessible and visible at any time, which could be a visual cue. But would, for instance, listening often to music be a way to help you in those situations when you will become stressed? You know, let's say you have a habit of listening to music, and so next time you're feeling anxiety, either because you're listening to music, you've trained your capacity to be mindful, or maybe you have the habit of grabbing onto that headphone. Unless it could be also a bad habit as well. Sometimes people mention that. Yeah,
it could be as well. I think it requires self-awareness to know also the type of music that you appreciate, because I think there's proven in the music therapy literature that, you know, preferred music also reaps benefits greater than therapist-selected music.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Even people are aware of how music has the potential to enliven people with dementia, and that's very strongly associated with favorite music because of the autobiographical associations. And in dementia, that's what's going away, unfortunately. The
Exactly.
autobiographical sense, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think through that is also important, right? To engage in these processes to familiar music or to known music. That way it keeps the engagement even higher. That way you can have, this song reminds me of this person, but then what is actually happening in the music? And you can kind of parse those things out. I think the main takeaway is really just focus on active listening. Is something I would recommend strongly because music is also over engagement in musical stimuli or noise can also be harmful for your ears and longevity of your ability to hear. So
Right.
reduce the volume, listen more actively.
Yeah. Well, I think those are great things to take home. Is the fact that yes, you can listen to music often, but the the how you say the proposal and the thing that you'd like people to really take home and what you like to bring to music therapy with your protocol is the fact that we should listen to music actively, meaning it's actually a complex thing to listen to it actively. Mainly musicians train for it most of their lives, but you can do that by either having a sense of what you feel, and that's still active because you have to focus on the musical environment and atmosphere, or you have to focus on the elements of the music, the rhythm, the instruments, the melody, um, and this is active listening. And this is in contrast to background music, which could be the most common way of listening to music. It could be just, oh, I'm bored or something. I want to put something in the background or in the supermarket or something. Although in maybe the background music usage, we've discussed of two ways of looking at this. Maybe distracted and not really paying attention, or mind surfing, right? Mind surfing could be actually the mechanisms through which uh, listening to music to focus on a task is the way that engages your creative thinking, because you're maybe familiar with the music, you're entrained with the music, the rhythm is not too complex for you to actually keep focus on the task, and this stimulates your imagination in regards and related to the task. Do you have any a tip that you'd like listeners to go through? Um,
Um, well, every time there's a musical stimulus, I would say just think about how it relates to yourself. You know, where it's felt, how you would, I guess, mimic it, embody the music, I think, fully, and um, allow yourself to still think about your life in general, or think about. It's a tricky thing, isn't it? Being able to listen to music, being able to focus on a stimulus, but also think about or also mind wander. But I think that's the suggestion is really being able to focus on music and then think about yourself at the same time.
so maybe I look. That's great. That's a great question actually to ask yourself. It's really about introspection, yes, and allocate 5 minutes a day to focus on a song that you're listening often. Think about it, play it again, and think of different aspects while you're listening to that song.
There could also be a sense of curiosity. Approach music listening with curiosity. Um, try to listen for something you haven't heard before in the music, and I think that might also stimulate um, more more cognitive engagement, which might be beneficial.
Fantastic. I want to touch on two last things that you're trying to isolate with your protocol, actually. With focusing on active listening and training that, you're trying to separate it from the relaxation aspect, right? That's something that you want to make clear. Like, is the relaxation prior to a music therapy session affecting the active listening or not? It probably does, but you want to separate that. Is that correct?
It is, yes, exactly. And I think that just the relaxation alone isn't enough for some people to then reap the benefits of the listening experience. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know how to listen to music, then there's no point in relaxing beforehand.
Yeah, yeah. You might be focusing on something else, and music therapy isn't as beneficial.
Exactly.
And the last point is that although you're trained as a neurologic music therapist, here, if I understand correctly, you just want people to focus on music as a whole rather than necessarily techniques in neurologic music therapist. I'm not trained in that. I'm not a music therapist, but my understanding is that sometimes you can use just distinct elements of music to have therapeutic benefits, like, oh, let's just do rhythms today with a percussion instrument. Oh, let's sing a melody to learn certain words or whatever, if there's a speech problem, or etc. So, yeah, can you touch on this distinction, or is this something you just want to combine as well?
Well, I think this technique and this protocol definitely has its place, or could have its place in a therapeutic context in neurologic music therapy. I think the role of neurologic music therapy in this was primarily the influence of the intentional protocol, looking at how music is already used as a way of reallocating attentional resources, and I sort of adapted the idea of attentional resource allocation into this protocol.
Fantastic. So that was a fascinating discussion. There's a lot that we went through, but the main takeaways I've taken from this conversation is listen to music actively, identify what elements are happening, what you feel, do daydream, and think about your life and how it associates with that song that you're familiar with, or novel song. And that's gonna bring a lot of benefits, not only for your emotional regulation, but also your attention. You're gonna learn better normally if you start doing this. You can use it for mind surfing, and that's a goal that you should aim for. Train your active listening so that you can mind surf. I love that word as well. It's a fascinating word. Here's your LinkedIn again, Bradley, and
Yes.
You're at Goldsmith at the moment, and yeah, music therapist, and there's more stuff you can explore Bradley's LinkedIn. Yeah, and if there's anything else, there's probably an email here, contact information. Let's see. Good. Yeah. You're up to date.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, it was a pleasure to have you, Bradley.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and you speak French as well. On a eu une bonne conversation la dernière fois qu'on s'est vu. J'aime beaucoup ton accent québécois.
Merci beaucoup.
Est-ce que tu peux dire quelque chose en québécois aux personnes par rapport à la musique et la discussion?
Ouais, il faut absolument être capable d'avoir l'attention sur la musique en même temps que avoir l'attention sur soi-même.
Super. Super. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Bradley.
Il faut que je pratique mon français pour l'année prochaine. J'ai une vision pour aller étudier à l'Université de Montréal en français, en psychologie. Donc,
Ah oui. Ok,
ouais.
super. L'Université de Montréal. Très bien, très bien.
Ouais.
Je connais Concordia. Je pense que je suis allé une fois et j'ai un ami qui était là. Toi, je pense que tu es allé à Concordia, n'est-ce pas?
Ouais.
Super.
Puis c'est ça, ça va être la neuropsychologie clinique, j'espère.
Ok, super.
L'année prochaine.
Trop bien, très bien. Bah, j'espère aussi. Trop cool.
Merci beaucoup.
Ouais. À bientôt.
Génial. À bientôt. Merci.
Thank you so much for listening all the way to here at this conversation. Hopefully you've learned a lot as well. If you enjoyed today's discussion, there's two things you can do. You can first of all subscribe and like to this channel. And secondly, you can join our online school community where we dive deep into understanding the musical emotions so we can really develop an inner sense in reaction to music. Musicians have a developed sense of emotion when they listen to music, and that's what we train in that community. And we also have neuroscience discussions on a monthly basis. So if you enjoy these kind of conversations, check out the school community, subscribe, and I'll see you very soon for more health, vengeance, and harmonies.